And I think that let's start at the beginning, and I will watch the waiting room, and people will come in as they come in. And I'm sure that some of the people in the US are just waking up, and they'll be here shortly. So
Okay.
please, musicians wrestle everywhere. Emily Dickinson, translation and the arts.
Thank you, Dan. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm George Boziwick. I'm the host of this session, and this promises to be, I think, really special, maybe even a little unique. And we're going to be talking about Dickinson translation and music. And this session is jointly sponsored by the Dickinson translation community and also the arts committee of EDIS, of which Don Skoog and I are co-chairs. Hi, Don. So I think we will open the session right away with a bit of translation, and I'm going to ask Baihua Wang from Fudan University in Shanghai to start us off by giving her presentation on Dickinson and translation. Good morning, Baihua. Good evening, Baihua.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I think I'm gonna ask for share my screen first. Let me see it.
Yes.
Good. Let me see how to make it larger. I cannot find the button here.
On the bottom right hand of your screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe here, right?
Keep going. The last one, the last button just before the volume control, the zoom control. The very last. No, over more to the left. To the left. Right there.
Okay, good. So, hello everyone. I'm so glad to be here to share my very recent thoughts on translation. Although I have long been a practitioner of translating Dickinson's poetry into Chinese, this is actually my first time speaking at an international conference on the topic. I have long hesitated, worried that international audiences who don't understand Chinese might find these details too tedious. I'm addressing this topic today because I have been invited by two editors, Elizabeth and Wendy, to contribute an essay to the Routledge Companion to Global Dickinson. I have developed some new thoughts on this subject and would like to seek your advice. On the other hand, at the invitation of two musicians and composers, Don Skoog and George Boziwick, since the year 2025, I provided recordings of my Chinese translations and readings of Emily Dickinson's 4 poems for their musical compositions. Through this invaluable and delightful process, I gained inspiration from the music and developed a more visceral understanding of musicality in poetic translation. These are the two immediate occasions that have prompted me to share my reflections on translation with you today. Thank you so much for the invitation and trust. Today, drawing on my own reading and translation practice, I would like to share with my fellow translators 3 predicaments in translation. I think these predicaments may well be common to translators working in any language. We all need to acknowledge their existence so as to maintain a more cautious and humble attitude. Yet they may also serve as a salutary reminder and encouragement. So first I'm going to share is it might be helpful to begin by translating or transporting ourselves into Dickinson's time and imagine her readers, and then return to address the readers of our own time. The second step, maybe we could admit squarely or confront squarely the tensions between languages and cultures, and then in Dickinson's own spirit, tell all the truth to our readers, but tell it slant. And the third is it might be crucial to keep trying to think with Dickinson. This is what I quote from Jed Dapperman. As we wrestle with the problems of cognition and expression, because after all, a great poet asks for a translator who can rise to her. So I think on the whole, as a translator, I have felt a sense of frustration with few moments of satisfaction and pride, much like any serious readers who approaches Dickinson's poetry inevitably experiences. Dickinson herself as a poet was acutely aware of this. Her poetry directly confronts the predicaments of cognition and expression. So here I quote Roman Jacobson because he says that poetry is actually deliberate and organized violence against everyday language. So of course, the reason we, in order to, elucidate the first two problems or predicaments, I should say that, however, for contemporary readers, especially non-native speaker readers, who read a great deal of free words, many poems by modern poets, these deviant, the unconventional features may easily go unnoticed. So that's why I think we need to go back to Dickinson's time to think about this first. So I think Dickinson is actually sounds more unconventional in her time than to our time. Because when I translated her poems, one important reason is that most of her poems adapt a fairly traditional common meter, which is known as the ballad meter or hymn meter. This meter is characterized by its melodiousness and smoothness, so that despite the abundance of experimental elements in Dickinson's poetry, to our ears, it still sounds relatively fluent and agreeable. So I'm here to post this poem because I struggled a lot, try to keep the balance between these tensions of the traditional hymn and Dickinson's rebellions, the opposition to the hymn tradition. So here I'm going to share, you can see those rhymes here, scars, are, despair, air, breath, and death. This is so, so even, right? If you read it and then you feel it's not so, Dickinson as an experimental poet, especially when you make a comparison with those Isaac Watts of other hymn writers, you will know that immediately because they use the same words and the same rhymes, like heavenly, heaven of joy and love, hope, heaven ascend, and even breath and death, the same words and rhymes, right? Like this and this. And this is one Phoebe Brown. This is familiar, so familiar with Dickinson is so familiar with because this is one of her mother's family's circle. So he also make fun of this with her brother Austin once in a letter. Also, this hymn, village hymns for social worship. So you can see if you make comparison, then you can suddenly realize how this oppose or contradict with what a hymn looks like. So even though for the Victorian ears, I think those words like haft is kind of rustic, not so elegant, right? But Dickinson keep that way, and that's why the two early editors try to polish this, do some surgery on this. You can see those things, especially they entitled this poem as a winter. This is what I quote from Helen Vendler. He gave me a very, very important insight about this because he says that despair, the theological concept of despair, is less well known now than in the 19th century. Modern readers hardly realize that it is one of the two sins that can prevent salvation. Despair means to give up hope. So, but when the editors give this title, Winter, it seems inoffensive. But when we translate it into Chinese, I struggle a lot about those, how to keep this hymn-like rhythm, but at the same time to show the readers, the Chinese readers, those, so rebellious things there, especially when Isaac Watts, the hymns, try to give people a hope, but Dickinson, on the contrary, give us this kind of new sensibility of the winter afternoon sunlight, because after that it will be shade, it will be darkness. So even though he used the same words like breath and death, but he uses so differently. So when I translate it, I'm trying hard to, because there are so many Chinese translators, there are very famous ones. The first one is Taiwanese poet and translator. The second one is they are so famous, but I'm not satisfied with fluent and elegant translation at all. So I tried several times. At last, I got something I'm a little satisfied, because there is a comma here. You have to press a little bit. So nobody paid attention to this kind of, the rhythm is quite different from him at all. It's so different. So if I translate, I think, make this too fluent and graceful in Chinese, it is likely to deviate considerably from the original. So I think I need to resist the temptation to please readers, which indeed requires courage. And before I move to the second poem, I wanted to give you a very humorous, a very, very enjoyable comments made by a sinologist. Actually, Paralink worked on modern Chinese literature and the classical Chinese novel. This is a review on a book and a translation. But he said something very interesting. He says that a sense of terseness expands at the same time that tenseless, numberless, voiceless, uninflected, and uninflexible Chinese characters can achieve this kind of, in fact. But in contrast, one person has a butterfly net and the other a window screen. He's talking about the translation of Chinese novel into English, but at the same time, he make a very interesting comment on Emily Dickinson. He said, Emily Dickinson might have come to be known as the greatest poet in world history if she had written in classical Chinese. Why I quote this? Because actually, this is not a luck for Chinese translator. This is actually, that's why as a Chinese translator of Dickinson's poetry, I most of the time failed to convey this kind of, unconventional, experimental elements in Dickinson's
Can't hear you,
poetry.
Baihua.
Uh-huh.
Speak directly into the microphone.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
This is a very self-referential poems. Everybody familiar with this? Because Kristen Miller made such a wonderful interpretation already. So I just try to make use of her comments to show you how Chinese translation gonna be delete all of them. So when you read it in Chinese, none of them exist. It's just so fluent because we just cannot use another language, a very brand new language to translate Dickens because we have that kind of uninflected language already. So that's the dilemma I have to encounter all the time. I wanted to point it to one thing here because even back to Victorian time, this is the violence of this poem occurs within the machinery, while its exterior remains largely unruffled, maintaining a roughly regular 4-3-4-3 meter. Although the poem has no perfect rhymes, it features multiple consonances and assonances so that to contemporary ears, this little cruel press machine seems not to emit any particularly grating noise as it works. So this is even more so in Chinese. So that is my main point today. In Dickinson's poetics if Dickinson's poetics can be characterized as a form of violence against the language, attempt to haunt art through devices such as extreme ellipses, condensation, and inventive syntactical combinations, then her poet's grammar bears a latent correspondence with classical Chinese grammar. And this classical Chinese grammar is still highly active in modern Chinese poetry. So I think this is why I think I'm not satisfied with none of my translations so far. That's why I think the only way to make it up is to use thick translation, to use lots of commentaries like I am doing right now to show people, to talk to my readers what's going on here. So I wanted to move to the second part. I wanted to thank Dawn, and then in the year 2024, I watched and then listened to this wonderful performance, and also Dawn invited me to translate and read a poem and made it a very interesting multimedia composition. I enjoyed very much with Li-hsin. And then we had a conference shortly after the Taiwan's conference last summer, and my students performed several Dickinson music. One of them is George, the other, one of them is Dawn. So none of them are professional musicians or performers. They majored in Chinese department, but they perform so well. I'm so proud of my students. But now I'm going to move to the poems I provided for Dong, I think he's going to talk about later. But I wanted to focus on several points here. One is about the ripening and maturing. So how I try to make those words more resonant in Chinese. I think there's very interesting things here: product and process, and jobs and disclose. There's a alliteration here, and also I tried hard to use Chinese words because this one interesting point is here that ripening in Chinese is actually to become and grow into ripe. It's already a process. It's like ripening. It's not just a ripe or ripen, it's ripening. And a product is in Chinese literally means to become or grow into a fruit, Okay, and so that's why I use another term, another word, 圆满, to translate maturing, because 圆满 means round and full, literally, but there is a spiritual meaning. It means spiritual wholeness. But in order to translate the maturing, the process, so I put one word, 渐趋, that means progressing toward spiritual wholeness. And also for the off-site and homelier, I use this Chinese words to make it more insight. 瞧得见, and then 不起眼 means inconspicuous. But 不起眼 in Chinese also has something related to see, but it's not so remarkable, right? And then the other poems I provided for George is this little one I enjoyed so much. But in terms of the music, I think I try to make this poem sounds like more music in Chinese, because I used the end rhyme from the very beginning to the end. And then I wanted to show you a very interesting Chinese 4 tones. And then there is a professor in Harvard, is a Chinese American linguist and a composer himself. He tried to use the 5-level tone marking system. So you can see, if you know a little bit music, you know this is high level, high rising, falling rising, and the high falling. And then it shows the grading, the level, the tone there. So that's why I use those words to translate this little, this is less complicated one. I enjoy it so much, especially in terms of the musicality. So you can see I used 鸟, 烧, 妙, 调, and 消 to make this more musical-like. The last poems I'm going to talk about is the third question I'm going to propose, is the real difficult, the real predicament. Because like this one, I'm working with George on this one. We discussed this back and forth for so many times already, but it still remains a riddle to me. And I'll show you one thing about my translation is the transport. The transport. It happened to the tongue. It's not something that happened to someone. It's to the tongue. So when I translate, I struggled a lot because for the first time I translated into ecstasy, because you know the Greek meaning, the literal meaning of this ecstasy means out of oneself, jump out of transcendental. It's becoming, transport into something else. It's like a trance, or it's like very much like the out of spirit thing. But the second try is 出神 in Chinese. It means out of spirit or mind. It means outward projection. There are several related words in Chinese that is very, very interesting one. But later, I tried the third time. I used the 变身. It means transformation, means metamorphosis, because it's more related to the last sentence of the first stanza, new life. So here I'm going to talk about how Emily Dickinson music book I benefited a lot from this, because I know I translated this whole Emily Dickinson life already, but I didn't pay much attention to her musical life. So that's why George book is so valuable to my translation. From his book, I know there's lots of the interesting band connections there, and morning stars also related to the hymns. This is I took from George Boziwick's book. This is a note. It calls Miller and also gives lots of informations here. That's why I think we're always going back to Victorian time to think about Dickinson's reader first. And then Isaac was again the morning star. This is George emailed to me. That was several days ago. She mentioned about this again to me to make it clear. But I do think I have a quotation from Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice. Because I think when Dickinson says, some say it is the spheres at play. It is a quotation. It's a resonance with Shakespeare's very famous and very beautiful quotation here. But it can trace back to Greek ideology of the sphere at play, the musical harmony, the universal harmony, like a music. But he also talk about, some say, that bright majority of vanished dames and men. So it reminds me of several of Dickinson's poems. When Samuel Bowles died, this is a very famous one, because it talks about the whole of immortality secreted in a star. I think she tried to make use of this kind of universal music, and also the star to talk about the human being's immortality. And this one too, about the George Lord. I think I'm going to talk about why I think this poem remains a riddle to me, but at the same time, I think one might initially surmise. Let's move back to this poem. Surmise that this is the musicians merely seeing birds, right? Seeing birds. Yet the speaker swiftly dismissed that possibility and proceed to reject every earthly, man-made force. Not
I want to speak directly into the microphone.
Okay, it's not a band, not a tambourine, not a hymn from the pulpit. What then remains? we know at least that this is something which has befallen the tongue. In the last stanza, the speaker states that people offer competing theories. This one. So I think he also mentioned some religious people think it's a heavenly church service. If God is pleased to allow it, we shall ascertain. This is the last sentence. But one of my thoughts about this poem is the synesthesia. Synesthesia. I think it uses synesthesia, auditory imagery, to depict visual scenes. Specifically, music describe the sunrise from dawn through the afternoon and finally turns to the starlight of night. In this poem, the celestial musicians are heard everywhere, wrestling in the air all day long. Their music begins before dawn and continues through the morning and afternoon. By the final stanza, the speaker turns to the night sky, where the starlight is imagined as the harmony of the spheres, an internal concern that never ceases. Dickinson takes something we see every day, sunrise and the bright sky, and refuses to name it plainly. By calling it music, she makes us feel how strange and overwhelming light actually is. Then, by listening out the wrong guesses, she shows that both human comprehension and language are too small to explain something as simple yet divine as sunlight. The riddle is precisely the point. The universe is beautiful, yet we cannot fully decipher its mystery until we pass beyond this life. Maybe not. I didn't stress the last line, please God shall ascertain, when I read it for the final recording and send it to George, because I did it on purpose, because I don't think Dickinson counts on divine assurance like the religious faithful do. To me, it sounds far more like a question than a statement. This poem, however, can also be read in reverse, from the last stanza to the first, as Dickinson's version of a resurrection narrative. It seems to me that she borrows emotional architecture of resurrection, its promise of new life, rapture, and hope, but transposes into foundation from the miraculous to something natural and earthly, the sunrise. What emerges is a naturalistic, this worldly, secret experience. As many scholars have pointed out, her all belongs to this life and this world. Through her poetry, even as she rejects orthodox dogma, she nevertheless captured those transcendent moments and situates them in an event she can witness firsthand and feel personally the daily rising of the sun. So that's why I think when I read it for George, I try, when I discussed this poem with George, I said that William Wordsworth has something to do with this. I think Dickinson understands this so well. I have said that poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It takes its origin from emotion recollected in tranquility. And Dickinson has written so many poems about this sunrise and sunlight from morning to the night. And they are, like a circle. This one is also has something to do with the predicament of recognition or cognition and comprehension or the expression, because he said something in the morning's day. I still think it's something that cannot depict it in human beings' language. You can only feel it. You can only, use different kinds of ways to describe it, but still you cannot touch the real core of this. So that's why when I translated this poem, I tried my hard to, reproduce my understanding of this. But I think I should stop here. Thank you so much. And I will wait for George and Don to discuss more about the music. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Baihua. Thank you so much. That was really wonderful. And we will, before we move on to the music, I would like to get some more discussion, perhaps with the other translators, Li-hsin, Axel, Bruna, and then Don will talk about his music and not only the translations in Chinese, but other languages as well. But in the meantime, it would be nice to get a little bit of discussion from the other translators, Li-hsin, Axel, and Bruna.
Great. Thank you so much for Baihua and Don and George and Axel and Brunilda for such a wonderful opportunity here to have me. I am not by profession, not really a translator. So I would like to talk a bit about my students' art project, which is veering towards something a little bit more closer to some kind of interpretative project there. If it's possible, I would like to share my screen. Right. I wonder if you could see this. I suppose yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I absolutely enjoy this Baihua's conversation with George about how Dickinson is very much a poet that deserves really merit of close reading, and all this translating efforts really speak centrally to our understanding of her poetic complexity and global impact. Since the theme of this annual meeting is about connecting with Dickinson, I thought I will use this opportunity to discuss a bit of my student art project last year I curated during the Taipei conference. For a couple of my students, they sort of feel like they created this art project and that was being displayed in the quiet, dark corner of the conference, and they feel like a bit the conference for them sometimes could be experience of anticlimax because they feel like, oh, we make this, but it was like no one really commented on it. And I told them that that's really not true, because actually afterwards, a lot of you lovely people have told me about how much you enjoy their artwork. So here I would like to sort of showcase some of the works here. As you can see on the screen here, those are the two paintings done by some of the students and colleagues and I feel like a lot of them have something to do with how Dickinson's poems have been received in Taiwan, especially how her voice of intimacy so sort of can be translated into their artwork, where they feel like they could be Dickinson, or they could be Sue, or they could sort of feel like Dickinson is a close friend of theirs. So for me, I think a lot of them experience something that's almost more embodied and immersive when they read Dickinson. So I'd like to begin with a Dickinson poem I would not paint a picture. Fascicle 17, written around the summer of 1862. In the poem, Dickinson presents an intriguing provocation about art, music, and poetry and the nature of representation. I would not paint a picture, or rather be the one, its bright impossibility to dwell delicious on, and wonder how the fingers feel, whose rare celestial stir evokes so sweet a torment, such sumptuous despair. I remember having a quick discussion with Axel about this poem in his upcoming essay in the Dickinson special issue as well. And while Dickinson, like many of us, was accustomed to live her life vicariously through reading, writing, thinking, gardening, and perhaps dreaming, her poem here speaks to an alternative utopian artistic vision, the bright impossibility to dwell delicious on, a pleasure so sweet, a torment so sumptuous that you can potentially rival or replace the joy of artistic creation itself. So I always feel that this is a great poem to sort of to be juxtaposed with the another poem of Dickinson where Dickinson talks about the joy of dwelling in possibility. And here she seems to present another type of argument where the importance of embodiment trumps the art of representation. So in a way, I kind of feel like the conference last year sort of practiced this Dickinsonian art of dwelling delicious on, but deliberately breaking away from the traditional structure of academic symposia centered solely on paper presentations. So this is a sort of a like the album here, short mini album of all the wonderful presentations, artworks that have been contributed by various scholars here. So you sort of introduce multi-dimensional practices, including art curation, music performances, creative writing, translation workshop, horticulture, tea culture, and so on and so forth. For me, those arrangements stem from a conviction that Dickinson's poetry expresses so well that aesthetic experiences should be rooted in the sensuous, the immersive, and the bodily. So you could see a bit of the glimpse of that here, but I would like to sort of focus a bit more on the initiative design for the students in my Dickinson seminar last year to create a living artistic response to her garden poetry. It acts as an empirical experiment that invited students to experience firsthand Dickinson's quiet passion as a gardener, naturalist, herbarium maker, and poet. Here, so the prompt instructed them to consider their concept of an ideal garden, how one might be recreated based on Dickinson's work, what her poetry teaches us about the relationship between human and non-human entities, and the resulting creations were exhibited at the conference, as you could see the table there. And they were reading a bunch of botanical critical materials, including some artworks and interviews by Amanda and Leah, and also Peter kindly offered this list of Excel sheets with where he meticulously place the poems next to the native empires plants mentioned in the poem there. So the students read those materials and then they generate some responses here. Right, so I sort of outlined 7 conceptual approaches for understanding plant-human relationships based on those 12 responses from my students here. So this framework moves progressively from a human-centered, anthropocentric perspective towards a more integrated mode of plant thinking or plant being or how to be the one rather than representing one there. So you could see the top of the list, anthropomorphism, where it talks about plants as humans. Then they also have botanical inspiration, where humans were inspired by plants. And some of them talk about plants being some kind of therapeutic experience, some kind of psychological medicinal effect of plants. Some of them would talk about this organic growth, some kind of plant-human co-evolution. And there are also like rare moments where we have this intersubjective like moment where plants are identified as like not just plants being identified as humans, but human being identified as plants. And finally, there is this part where they have those meta-vegetal poetic movement where they talk about this plant-human writing triangulation. These seven attitudes actually overlapped. So I would like to use the following three student examples to demonstrate how the plant, the human creator, and the written text intersect to generate new aesthetic meaning within a pedagogical setting in my classroom here. So the first creator is Chen Pingzhu, Peggy. She chooses the poem that was also mentioned in Baihua's presentation, Essential Oils Are Wrong, where she selects this lime plant as her pairing plant there, where she talks about how the plant releases a critical breath, lime and hops, when touched, wrapping the hand in invisible globes of citrus. Its fragrance lingers like memory captured in oils and soaps, yet rooted in living green. In Dickinson's essential oils are wrong. A truth is distilled through care, not conquest. The screw preserves rather than destroys, holding the rosemary gently in place. My such a plant and the poem collectively waft up the everlasting suggestion that the bond between humans and nature need not to be one of strife, but could instead be a harmony patiently grown. Okay, this is her response there. And then the second one is by Wu Xinxian Ken, who I believe also presented his artwork about Dickinson and the poetic of waste and cleaning on the first day panel. Here he chooses two poems, Through the Dark Sod as Education and To This World She Returned. Both poems depict a poetics of compost that reveals a subtle yet radical reconfiguration of how we understand life, death, and the ethical potential of decay. They affirm the soil as a site of learning, dwelling, and longing, a medium through which beauty and mourning coexist. Reading through both Dickinson poems, I envision a poetic garden that does not just celebrate the thriving life as a blooming lily and a violet indicate, but also embraces the composition of life and death as the composing dark sod informs. The final example is from Mahadi Huang Tingzi. Her poem is The Grass So Little Has to Do. The grass, humble and unobtrusive by the roadside, is elevated by Dickinson into a precious treasure cloaked in simple green. Who knows it is adorned with dews as pearls at night? Who knows its odors are so divine when it dies? From a human utilitarian perspective, these details are ignored, but if we turn to appreciate its essence rather than its practicality, we may find ourselves spiritually richer than humankind itself. Why not admire the grace of the grass in its very decay, when it's pulled from the earth or when it's sliced down by the mower's cold blade? So this is basically the like a way to sort of show how the responses from those seminar students point toward the possibility of decentering the human ego, even only in a small way through close readings of Dickinson's garden poems. They further affirm that the provocation posed in Dickinson's poem, I Dwell I will not paint a picture about how to live both deliciously and vicariously, physically and ethically in relation to the non-human world remains an urgent question for us today. I feel like this project also speaks to the Dickinson Museum's current interpretive project where they have the landscape gardening app. If you download the app, you visit the museum, you will be able to listen to people's interpretation of some of the gardening projects, some of the flowers, some of the landscaping, and also listen to their coupling with a Dickinson poem of some sort. So, in an era of unprecedented political turmoil, ecological crisis, and social destruction, the need to connect with Dickinson through her embodied poetics to dwell in its bright impossibility has never been more vital. Right, so thank you very much. I think I will stop my sharing now. Thank you.
Thank you, Li-hsin. That was wonderful. Thank you very much. Before we move to the music portion, I would like to ask Axel and Brunilda if they have any commentary on the art of translation.
Bruno, would you like to go first?
I'd just like to mention that I'm not a professional translator either. So I come from the teaching background, and it's the interpretations of my readers or my students as readers is what I use in the few translations that I've made for our translation and interpretation workshop. Maybe, Axel, you can explain the translation and interpretation idea that we use in the translation workshops.
So yeah, thank you. Yes, this is a project that we took over from Juan Carlos and Antoine Cazet a few years ago. A project they started, if I'm not mistaken, because at the time I was not a member of the society yet, but as part of the local chapters, at the Dickinson, Emily Dickinson Society has different communities, and this is one of the communities. The translation community has been organizing online workshops to translate and discuss Emily Dickinson's poetry. And since last year with Bruno, we have hosted two online events. In the first one, we hosted Chris Miller, and in the second one, in last May, we hosted René Berglund. And basically, what we do is discussing different Emily Dickinson poems and try to include as many as languages possible to see how we can arrive at more interesting, different interpretations of Emily Dickinson's poetry, because every Emily Dickinson poem opens so many different possibilities of translation and interpretation, and comparing different languages in trying to understand Emily Dickinson's poetry, her poetic world, we arrive at different understandings. And basically, you don't have to be a translator. You don't have to be a professional translator to participate in those events, but you're just welcome to attend any of those online workshops, even if you're just basically interested in Emily Dickinson's poetry in general. But at the same time, we would like to have as many as languages as possible to see, to open Emily Dickinson to a wider, more international community, and to have a better sense of what kind of work is being done on Emily Dickinson, and which language families, what kind of translation strategies are taking place when we're reading Emily Dickinson. This is the basic, I think, question that is of interest to us. And just one thing that I would like to mention in relation to Baihua, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I think it's really fascinating, the very idea that you mentioned at the very opening slides, that the parallel you drew between translation and transporting ourselves. I think it's fascinating because actually we do transport ourselves, But at the same time, we can never really know whether we have arrived at the place that we wish to arrive. What I mean is we need somebody else to tell us whether the translation we came up with actually works or not, because in our own corner, we can basically say, well, I've chosen this word and then I've chosen this phrase to translate this expression from a 19th century poet to a completely different language family, to a completely different life world. But until someone else reads us, we can never be sure. So translation is actually a very collective enterprise. And we really need the engagement of other translators. We need the engagement of other languages, other people and readers to tell us whether our translations actually do work or not. And this is why I think the online workshops that we have been organizing are so important to the Emily Dickinson Society, in the sense of it opens us to the international community, and at the same time, it allows Emily Dickinson scholars as well to discuss and learn about poems themselves. Because every time we interpret a poem, we discover new senses, we discover new meanings that we have never thought of before. So if you're interested in translation, that's perfect. But even if you're not a translator, please take part in our discussions and join us in our online workshops. And we would like to have as many languages as possible. So thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to emphasize what Axel mentioned. Axel rightly suggested at the beginning when we took over that we add the term interpretation to the workshops. And Baihua mentioned today the close reading. Much of what we have done in the last two sessions is close readings, and it so much helps us in working with the poems that we've translated for the session. Axel and I have been translated into our respective languages, Turkish and Albanian, but the close reading by not only an native speaker, but somebody who has studied Dickinson thoroughly helps us a lot with understanding the poem.
Harry, go ahead, please.
Okay, so all I wanted to say was they're fabulous sessions. And as a non-translator and somebody just about speaking English, I have so much enjoyed those sessions, and they're all available on our YouTube channel. So you can check out the one with Chris Miller and the one with Renee. So please do. And I want to thank Bruna and Axel for all their work with the translation community and now the translation and interpretation community. So thank you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yes, thank you. I would certainly echo Parek's words. And the wonderful thing about this session this morning is that we are about to add another level to the translation aspect of Dickinson, and that is a musical one. And so I would like very much to turn it over to John, and he is going to share his work as a composer and a musician in translating and setting Dickinson's to music. John?
Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, and it moves?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, just checking. So, and before I start my presentation, just a reminder of how appropriate this is. George was the guy that originally came up with this idea. And when we're looking at it now, I'm thinking this is amazing because music is, we're talking about translation. Music is a language. It's literally a written language and an oral language, and it transmits ideas. So the fact that we're expanding the idea of translation to include music, I think is really cool. I think it's really interesting. It's amazing. Okay, so I just wanted to say that. And I'm going to try and jack through this because I recoiled in horror last night when I realized how long my presentation was, so I'm going to move quickly. So, This presentation examines how the structural changes created by translating Emily Dickinson's poems into other languages can be used as focal points for considering both the limitations of and the possibilities for composing music based on those translations. While Dickinson's original poems were largely set in common meter, when translated into other languages, their new metric forms become something fundamentally different. This alters or negates many of the methods we as Western composers employ for setting words to music. As the verse structures transform, so must our understanding of how to translate those verse structures into melodies and rhythms. So the three overriding considerations for me are: how does translating a Dickinson poem alter its underlying prosodic structure? How can I set these translated verses into musical meters that make sense of their structures? And how can I create meters, rhythms, melodies, harmonies, and tone colors that are culturally and contextually appropriate for the words? So I will focus on translations into Arabic, Spanish, Albanian, and Chinese. And this is really interesting because of both what Li-hsin and Baihua said, that the Chinese part of this, my part, is going to be in conversation with theirs. So I'm really interested to see what they say. Anyway, and Chinese, to show how the transformed metric structures can be translated into music, then consider the musical context that might be culturally appropriate in the resulting work. Okay, so as a baseline, the basic structure of English poetry is accentual syllabic verse. Here's a brief reminder. Accentual syllabic verse is a metrical system that measures both the total numbers of syllables in a line and the deliberate alternation of accented and unaccented syllables. Accent is the emphasis placed on certain syllables when spoken. Stressed syllables are relatively longer, louder, and of higher pitch. Syllables are the individual units of sound that make up a word. You guys know all this stuff, right? Most common feet in English are the am, I, trochee, anapest, dactyl, etc., which we were supposed to have learned in high school. So I won't define them here because this audience knows this stuff better than I do, right? So let's skip this part. So for composers, those prosodic meters translate into musical time signatures. For a more thorough discussion of the relationship between poetic meter and musical meter, you can go to my article, Making Emily Sing, exploring the relationship between poetical and musical time in setting Dickinson's poetry into song. Okay, so that's the baseline, right? So, but accentual syllabic verse becomes irrelevant when composing music set to verses in languages with fundamentally different prosodic structures. While some Albanian verse structures are based on accentual syllabic verse, or so I'm told, Spanish poetry is considered syllabic verse, while both Arabic and Chinese structure their verses using systems entirely different from the stress-based meters in English. So let's start with Arabic. The classical Arabic poetry relies on a system known as quantitative weight. In Arabic, it's called ilm al-arud, the science of prosody. Instead of measuring stressed syllables, Arabic poetry measures the duration of sounds based on alternating moving and quiescent, either dormant or inactive, letters. A moving letter is a consonant followed by a short vowel like ka, and a quiescent letter is a consonant with no following vowel or a long vowel like or ma. So a syllable can either be short, moving, or long, quiescent. There are 16 prosodic meters called bahur. In English, those mean seas, as in ocean, in classical Arabic poetry, although I can attest that there are many more folkloric and popular verses. These meters are comprised of various combinations of long and short sounds. The metric modes in their music are called iqa, which correspond exactly to the bahur of the prosodic meters. And I can tell you that from years of playing Arabic music, there are a lot more than 16 metric modes in Arabic music. To set Arabic verse to music, Arab composers use the appropriate iqa, or meter, to match the number and arrangement of the syllables in the poem. 1, 2, 3, 4 beats per measure, etc. There's a lot more of this. I've been studying that for 10 years now and feel like I barely made a dent. We could spend the whole 2 hours here just going down this particular rabbit hole, but I think you get the idea. Arabic the Arabic syllabic system creates issues for my Western brain because when I translate Dickinson into Arabic, the number of syllables in the resulting poem don't match any of the Arabic prosodic meters, the traditional ones. This is fine, and the Arabs I've shown my translation to are encouraging since they seem to be flexible with new forms. But this leaves me with a question. How do I compose music for this untraditional poetic form without compromising the hybrid poetic meter? I'm still working on this, but I'm going to show you how I worked around this problem in two different ways. First, by recording a native speaker into what I hope is a complementary musical background in Dickinson Sound Bath number 5. And this leads to the next problem, creating musical contexts that are appropriate both to the culture of the original language and for the meaning of Dickinson's verse. So my two examples are both based on Wild Nights. So here is Dickinson's. These are really short too. So tell me if you can't hear the music. Somebody speak up. Everybody see it? Hear it?
Yes.
Okay.
ليال جامحة ليال جامحة لو كنت معك لكان ينبغي أن تكون الليالي الجامحة تأفنا لا جدوى من الرياح بقلب في الميناء انتهى من البوصلة انتهى من الخريطة التجديف في عدن البحر لكم أود لو أن أرسم هذه الليلة فيك Now it's not going to move. Okay.
Wonderful, Don. Thank you.
Now I have to figure out how to get it to move to the next slide. Oh, here we go. Okay. So, thank you. I worked around it another way the second time by having a live speaker float over the rhythmical bass in Leali Jamihat. It's the same poem. Because Dickinson's poetry is set in hymn tune, any Arabic translation is going to reflect that. But since the structure of the language is fundamentally different, it creates new sets of rhythms and meters. For example, Wild Nights in English is 2 syllables. Wild Nights. In Arabic, Leali Jamihat is 6. So this is a change I can certainly accommodate when writing new music, but not one that I can fit into the traditional Arabic bahur. Does this matter? Probably not, but I do find the problem challenging. So I'm just going to play a little part of Leali Jamihat from my band, just to give you an idea of how I went about sheeting and not having to deal with fitting it to the music. Okay, so my hope at some point is to set an Arabic translation of a Dickinson poem into an Arabic metric mode as well as the bahur. I think that my Arab friends would be impressed if I could wedge Dickinson's hymn tunes into an Arabic prosodic meter with an Arabic iqa or musical meter to match. Until then, rather than try to achieve that kind of fusion, I set my Arabic translation freely in music that evokes, I hope, a sense of classical Arabic culture. Come on, change. Oh, that's interesting.
Do you want to jump out of your screen and then back again?
I don't know. It worked last time.
Yeah, I think it should.
All right, so I should unshare and reshare.
Yeah, try that. In the meantime, your singer, you really subjected her to something she was familiar with or not familiar with?
No, we did. So she sings in about 5 different languages, but Arabic wasn't one of them. She did draw the line at Albanian and Chinese. She was like, "Yeah, no." So
Wow.
here we go.
It's so fascinating.
Gator. Okay, next one is Spanish. Okay. Oh, let me reshare. Otherwise, you guys aren't going to know what I'm talking about. There we go. The joys of technology. Okay. The Romance languages, Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, and Romanian, are syllabic languages, meaning that their verse forms are based on the total number of syllables per line, regardless of stress. While Spanish certainly has accents, its standard poetical forms don't take them into account, opting instead for a set number of syllables per line. This is much less of a problem for me because when I translate Dickinson's poetry into Spanish, the resulting prosodic form is pretty similar to English, generally. Seating a syllabic language like Spanish to music is easier because it lines up better to my understanding of how syllables line up to rhythms. In the case of my translation of "You love me, you are sure" into "Me quieres, estás segura," the rhythm changes, but the number of metric feet do not. So "Me quieres, estás segura" is 9 syllables and 4 metric feet, iambic tetrameter. But "You love me, you are sure" is 6 syllables, but it's still within 4 metric feet, iambic tetrameter. I'm just going to leave this up and do it this way.
Don, do you want to put your slideshow into slideshow mode?
No, I'm good. Let's just run it the way it is. Keep it simple. I'm already confused. So this is short. So Jenny felt on much more solid ground on that one than she did on the Arabic one. So when writing music for Spanish verses, the prosodic meters fall within the Western European and American traditions. Not so bad, right? Because it's accentual syllabic, which leads me to Albanian. So let me preface this section by saying that I cannot understand, read, or even pronounce anything in the Albanian language. Here's why. Every time I look at this, I start to laugh simply because I am so completely unprepared to do anything with it. So I rely on my research findings, such as they are, and then I'm going to throw myself upon Bruna's mercy. Hopefully she can correct or amend any of my mistakes. So Albanian can either be syllabic or accentual syllabic depending on the era and type of poetry. Traditional folk poetry is generally syllabic and set within an 8-syllable line called an octosyllable. I love that. Within which the stress patterns can vary. There's usually a break or caesura in the middle of the line. Because Albanian literary poetry has been influenced by Italian, French, and German verse, it tends towards accentual syllabic structures. The natural stresses within the language allow it to accommodate these forms. Two structures of note are the Albanian trochee, stressed, unstressed, right? Trochee, which follows the language's natural tendency to accent the penultimate syllable. And I love this, hendecasyllable, borrowed from Italian, that has an 11-syllable line. The Arabs also have an 11-beat verse and musical meter as well. Even though Albanian poetry is either syllabic or accentual syllabic, which in theory should be easier for a guy like me to set to music, the fact that it has no close relatives in its linguistic subgroup makes it an insurmountable challenge for the unprepared. That would be me. I didn't realize that when I was getting into when Brunilda, Kondi, and I decided to create a Dickinson sound bath in Albanian. As soon as I heard her recording, I knew that I was in no way capable of transcribing the words as lyrics into a musical score. Neither listening nor reading the words gave me any clue as to how to render them into melody and rhythm. So in theory, matching Albanian verses to familiar musical meters is very doable, but in practice that will have to wait until I have at least a vague understanding of how to pronounce the words. But I must admit, though, I love looking at them, and I love listening to Bruna recite them. The best I could do was take her recording and try to set it to an appropriate musical context. In this case, unless you actually speak Albanian, the meaning of the lyrics is unimportant. It's the sound that counts. To create a sound bath number 9, I made use of the language's natural accents by altering their rhythms to create an oral collage, a watercolor and sound, rather than setting the words to specific musical rhythms.
Sot me vetë që kanë sjellë. Këtë dhe zemrën pranë. Këtë dhe zemrën dhe të gjitha fushat edhe libatet mbahen. Numërojni mirë, nëse harroj, dikush shumë mund ta thotë. Këtë dhe zemrën dhe gjithë vletët që mbushin të filin thotë. Sot me vetë që kanë sjellë. Ja sot me vetë që kanë sjellë pranë. Këtë dhe zemrën dhe të gjitha fushat dhe zemrën edhe libatet që mbahen. Edhe libatet me zemrën pranë. Nëse harroj, këtë dikush shumë nëse harroj, të gjitha dikush shumë edhe libatet me gjithë vletët dhe zemrën dhe gjithë vletët nëse harroj, të filin dikush shumë ta thotë. Këtë dhe zemrën Vegit bletot, chumbush interfilin rot. Yasot me betet jucansiel. Câtă desemblem plan. Câtă desemblem petegita fusha e derivată în bani. Număroi nimir, năse haroi, dicuș șumântațot. Câtă desemblem vegit bletot chumbush interfilin rot.
Bruna, that sounds so cool. Okay, so I'd like to ask Bruna Kondi, the translator of our poem, whether she considers this accentual Slavic verse as in literary poems or Slavic as in traditional Albanian poetry, and to speak about any other aspects of her Dickinson translation that she thinks is relevant to the discussion. Bruna?
Yeah. Thank you, Don. Thank you very much. If Don was saying he didn't like listening to Albania, he didn't know what he was doing with the music, I didn't know where I was going when I accepted the offer to translate this poem and have it put into music. And I say that because going back to what Don mentioned, music is a language. That's a language I don't speak. The background of an average Albanian reader, listener, would be one who wasn't taught the composition of poetry, neither music appreciation. But we did study a lot of poetry and we learned a lot of poetry by heart, if that could be called studying. So our ears would be very much accustomed to the 6 and 8 syllable line, which is classic Albanian poetry. This is accentual syllabic, very much like classic Albanian poetry. I did some comparison with our folk poems, and it definitely is that. But when I worked with translating the poem, I wasn't even thinking about the sound of it. I did this more like a middle schooler going through an exercise, being taught that they believed I could do it, and I only worked with the language of the poem. And I based my translation of the poem on a previous translation that we have by an Albanian doctor, poet, and an Emily Dickinson lover. I had used the previous translation of the poem for the translation map that we have in the EDIS website. And because I worked with an exercise with my students where we took this translator's versions in Albanian, and then without knowing the original, my students translated them back into English. I thought I would work a little bit with the diction and make it more, I would borrow on Baihua today on like adjusting it to the readers of today after transporting ourselves as translators into the context of Emily Dickinson. So when I was translating the poem, I worked with diction and with changing a little bit the tone of the poem, because I believe the previous translator had given himself a little bit more freedom into using forms in Albanian language that we have. We have an admirative mood, which I've been talking about before, and he had made it more, he had changed the tone of the original poem, if I could say it like that. And then after Don did his research and had asked me to check if it was correct, I went and counted actually the syllables of the lines, and it varies with 8, 6, 10, and only 1, 11. I think what might have happened with the 11 syllables is my ear being familiar to the 11 syllable one as well, because it's been used by some Albanian poets. So this is not very technical, what I'm explaining. I can talk about the language of the poem. When I teach Emily Dickinson, I mostly help my students through the grammar of the poet, and then through opening it up to the interpretation of them as readers through the reader response theory, more than meter and sound and rhythm. So that is something I'm still a learner of. But I really love what Dawn did with that.
Thank you. Okay, now we get to the next part. So, while I do speak a little Chinese, I am not proficient enough to set it to music without expert help. This is something I want to try. To do this, I will need a basic understanding of how Chinese poetry is structured. Here's what I've learned so far. So, native speakers, feel free to correct me at the end, because this I am not an expert at. Chinese is a tonal, monosyllable language where every character is exactly one syllable. Every written character is exactly one syllable. Traditional Chinese poetry is structured in a form called tonal counterpoint. Rather than being formed around syllable length and stress, traditional Chinese poetry is built around a system of linguistic pitch. The four tones in the language are classified as either level, which is flat or rising, deflected, falling, or diphthong. And something just came back to me. It was Yisheng, Arsheng, Sanseng, Shuseng. Sound right? Right? Which is like sh, or sh. Right? So that's what it's based around. Forgive my bad accent. The order and combinations of these tones is regulated exactly throughout the poem. The lines are either 5 or 7 characters. A quatrain has 4 lines, while a standard poem has 8 lines in each stanza. The grammatical structure is parallel, with the middle lines of an 8-line poem mirrored, and later tones are inverted from the initial tones. Yikes. This is way more than I can easily understand, but I would like to find a translated Dickinson poem in this form to see if I can set it to music. In the meantime, I've taken Baihua and Li-hsin's beautiful recordings, and I've tried to set them to music with video that complements their voices, if not the exact content of the poem. As in the Albanian sound bath, I hope to meld the sound of the language with the musical and visual backgrounds to create a pleasing work of art.
成熟分2种，一种瞧得见，其力道球状缠绕，直到丝滑的成果掉落，香喷喷在地上；一种不太起眼，渐趋圆满。一个过程在芒刺里面，留待寒霜的利齿独自揭开，在远方10月的空气。 自信，点缀他洁白的脚，不惊慌。他的信念不畏惧。之后，在那草原上摇动他的翠绿铃铛，玫瑰般的生活全遗忘。此刻，狂欢在幽谷中。
Okay, so I wanted to ask Baihua and Li-hsin about their contributions to this, but maybe we should wait till the end because I want to make sure that George has enough time to do his presentation as well. So in conclusion, I have to state that none of these considerations of accents and meters in prosody or music, cultural context, musical context, or the methods of fusing these kinds of structures into Dickinson's translated verses, none of these are rules. Any composer can completely ignore them. After all, it's art, not scholarship. So rather than looking at them as constraints, I see them as opportunities, ways of constructing music that I wouldn't have thought of if I had just been relying on my own musical ear. They're possibilities, not limitations. Now, I got to tell you, all these different language and musical possibilities set my brain on fire. It's a huge puzzle with no rules or edges, but there is design. Having done some research on the languages inspires me to try and reconcile the underlying verbal structures and musical traditions that evolved within them with how I perceive rhythms and meters as a Western-trained composer. So the questions are, can I do this without parodying them? Can I do justice to the original languages while setting Dickinson's verse into them without harming the meaning? Would Chinese, Arabic, Spanish, and Albanian poets and musicians recognize their traditions within my compositions? Would employing these different verse forms and musical meters bring out a different kind of meaning to Dickinson's poems? I look forward to finding out. So that concludes my part of the presentation, so I will now turn it over to George and Baihua.
Thank you, Don. I will share my screen. That's not my screen. Oh, share. Here we go. All right. Finally. Okay. After the, can you all hear me?
Yep.
Great. After the Taipei conference last year, Baihua Wang invited me and other scholars, Dickinson scholars, and other U.S. Dickinson scholars to go to Shanghai the following week to attend a symposium. And I had a blast because I had not been to China for 40 years. And Baihua and I had talked about this the year before at the Amherst meeting. I was first in China in 1980 with the Long Island Youth Orchestra. I was an oboe player with the orchestra, and we were the first American orchestra to visit China. And getting choked up just talking about it. And it just stayed with me for 40 years. And to be able to go back was just unbelievable. So I presented at that meeting the week after the Taipei conference. And then Baihua invited me to return to Shanghai and with taking side trips to Suzhou and Wuhan. I presented my work on Dickinson and music at various conferences. And here we are on the bottom of the screen, Baihua and I, presenting our collaboration in an international poetry conference in Wuhan. And she had sent me 3 poems, and I'm going to share 2 of them with you today. And like Don, I had my own confrontation, so to speak. I don't mean to use such a strong word, but it was really eye-opening because I thought as a composer that I could wrestle with these things and really like let them have it, like stopping on certain tones, matching certain musical tones with Baihua's tones in her translation. And when I thought about doing that and began to write a scheme for doing that, I said to myself, this is not going to work. But what did work was that I chose instruments that could do that, namely a marimba. So this first piece is for marimba and clarinet. And this poem is, I believe Baihua said it was one of her favorites. And she sent it to me with a Chinese reading, a reading in Chinese. And I thought, yeah, clarinet and marimba would be the perfect thing here because the clarinet would represent the bird and the marimba would represent pretty much everything else, the atmosphere, the reaction to the bird, the whole embodiment of Dickinson's poem, and its reaction to it. One's reaction to it is taken up by the marimba, but you'll see that it does reach a climax on that squandering of a note. That's the high point of the piece where the two of them come together and clash. And then the bird seems to be very happy with that clashing because it did its thing. It said its note, and now it's out there in the universe, and the marimba just quietly evaporates into that universe while you hear the bird in the form of the clarinet flying away, very happy and very content. And at the very end, you hear the marimba go boom, 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 as if to echo the calamity that had just taken place, which is now a mere echo in our memories. So I'd like to play this for you now.
Yeah, I'm not hearing anything, George.
Okay, thank you. Oh boy, let's see. Trying to get these, go to the audio. Okay, 1 second. Try it again. Let me know if you can't hear it. Can you hear it?
Nope.
No.
No.
In the
Wow,
meantime, anybody read any good Dickinson poems lately?
really at a loss here as to what I need to do.
So you're running it on your computer and you can hear it, right?
George, there's an audio setting whereby we can hear your computer. If you go to the Zoom setting at the bottom left with the little caret, you see the little up arrow next to the audio setting. It should be in there.
Correct.
Yeah.
Where there's an audio setting where it says like share my sound with everybody.
Oh, yes. Share computer
You know what I'm saying?
sound. Yes.
Yeah, do that. Try that.
Okay, here we go. Thank you. Okay. I don't hear it. No,
Me neither.
why is that?
Hmm.
Share computer sound, stereo high fidelity.
We can hear your screen. There's a little thing at the top that says George Boziwick screen with sound. So the sound not coming out of your computer now?
No, it's not.
George, do you have a link to the video file?
No, it's embedded in the PowerPoint.
You clicked the little, I saw there was a little icon. If you pull out of the full screen view, maybe you can click the little icon and see if that works, and then we can all hear your screen.
Sure. How do I get out of full screen view?
Maybe you just press escape.
Oh, yeah.
Pressing
Okay.
escape should take you out. This has worked in class before.
Top left.
And now what?
Click the little icon that you said you embedded it on the that. Play.
Got it. I don't hear it.
Click it again.
Yeah.
There you go.
从
Here we
它的
go.
峰上跃起一只飞鸟，穿越柏树千梢，在一道不收门票的栅栏前，取悦他幻想之奇妙。然后，他昂起他的喉咙，挥霍出一个何等的音调。一个宇宙被偶然击中，至今震颤未消。
So you can see the little bird does its thing and flies away at the end. And the marimba, it's just kind of an echo of the calamity that's happened before. Boom, 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 boom. All right, thank you so much for helping me out here. I'll move on to the next one. And that is Musicians Wrestle Everywhere. And I'm going to give you a little overview here that I talk about in my book about all of the musical memories and experiences that Dickinson had as a young woman in the 1850s. They kind of come rushing back here in this poem. Musicians wrestle everywhere all day among the crowded air. I hear the silver strike. And waking long before the morn, such transport breaks upon the town. I think it that new life. It is not bird, it has no nest. And here we can surmise that Dickinson might be remembering the Jenny Lind concert, who was known as the Swedish Nightingale. And Lind sang this very popular song called the Bird Song. And there's a lot of curious trills going on in this bird song, as Dickinson called them. So this may be a reference that Dickinson is calling to her present mind from the past. It's not a band in brass and scarlet dressed. This is the Germania Musical Society, a concert which Dickinson saw at Amherst College at commencement time in 1854. And she wrote to her brother, I never heard sounds before. They seemed like brazen robins, all wearing broadcloth wings, and I think they were. Well, they all flew away as soon as the concert was over. The Germanians spearheaded a migration of European musical ensembles to the US in the 1840s and 50s. And their precision just wowed American audiences. They had never heard such musical precision and music played in such a highly sophisticated manner. So Dickinson certainly had something to say about it. And it's very interesting because it was an impression that stayed with her. And she alludes to it in this Musicians Wrestle Everywhere, nor band in brass and scarlet dress, nor tambourine, nor man. The minstrel music in her bound music book brings this into consciousness. It is not him for pulpit read, the morning stars, the treble led on time's first afternoon. I love what Baihua was saying about the movement from morning to afternoon to night. It's just spectacular. And here she's alluding to the hymn, Before the Heavens Were Spread Abroad, with its line, he led the host of morning stars. And this hymn was sourced by composer Li-hsin into a compilation that he did in 1832 called Church Psalmody. And the Dickinsons, this was in their library at home. So Emily had easy access to it. Some say it's the spheres at play. Some say the bright majority of vanished dames and men. Some think it's service in the place where we reflate celestial face. Please God shall ascertain. Now I will share this again. Musicians Wrestle Everywhere, Baihua's translation.
到处都有音乐家在较劲，一整天在拥挤的空气中间，我听到那银色的纷争。醒来，早在黎明之先，何等的变身突然降临小镇，我想那就是新生。不是飞鸟，它没有鸟窝，也不是乐队披着黄铜和亮红，不是金手鼓，亦非人，也不是颂歌从圣坛传出。晨星引领着高音部，在时光的第一个下午。有人说那是天体在演奏，有人说那是光明的大多数，那些逝去的太太和先生。有人以为是那方的仪式进行中，我们在那里带着最近的天界的面容，蒙神悦纳，终将确认。
So there you have it. This music, like Dickinson's poem, is very active. Musicians really going at it, but by the last stanza has become very contemplative. And so I mirrored that in the music, and I think it works quite well. So those are my two things to share. And I want to thank, again, Baihua. I mean, this really was a total game changer for me. I'd never done anything like this before, and it was just an absolute pleasure to work with Baihua and to just take her beautiful translations and the musicality of them and try my best to set music that was equally evocative. So thank you, Baihua. And thank you all very much. I think we have some time now for questions.
Okay, so George, unshare.
Yep. Okay. Great. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, I want to ask Li-hsin and Baihua about how translating English into Chinese alters the prosodic form of the poetry.
How would you like to go ahead? Great question. Thank you, Don.
Baihua?
Hi, maybe I should say that actually the second one is translated by Li-hsin, not by me. So you should correct it in your
It is
credits
both. It is both,
caption.
yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Baihua, lower your
And
camera,
also,
please. Lower your camera, please.
okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I forgot my earphone, so I'm sorry.
A little more.
Lower.
Okay,
Lower
you
your
know,
camera.
the one you showed in your slides is actually the previous one I sent to you. But anyway, I think I can answer your question about the pattern change. You mean from English to Chinese? I have struggling very hard to keep the same pattern. So I don't know Li-hsin can see it or not, because I really try to make the syllables almost the same as the original one. But sometimes I have to make some to make use of Chinese inflections, like I showed an hour ago about those tones, because when you think about it in music, you have to think about how to make use of Chinese tones, and they can resonate with music very well sometimes. But of course, you have to make some creative changes, not always the same as Dickinson's rhythm at all, right? So you have to do that. So sometimes I think I did something quite dramatic, but it makes some beautiful new poems, but in a way very similar to what Dickinson tried to produce. Thank you.
Yeah, they were certainly new
I would like
poems.
to sort of like add on to that a bit. First of all, I have to apologize, Baihua, because I think I changed your translation into my own
Totally
precisely.
fine. Yeah.
The Taiwanese way of using Chinese is slightly different from the mainland Chinese way. So for me to make it sound poetic, I just have to alter it a bit. So well, thank you for offering that allowance. I really appreciate that. The other thing about the translation of Chinese into English into Chinese for me is that there are two type of Chinese poetry. The first one is more classic. You pay attention to the form. Each line has to be the same length. Since syllable stress and so on and so forth, those classic forms are rigid. You have to fit your poems into the specific format. But the new type of poems were promoted after 1920s, during the new Republic of China period. And I feel like that's the transition from the old poetic form to the new poetic form, that Dickinson's poems are also, in a way, like being positioned. So you could always see translators struggling between whether to fit into the classical ones in 19th century form or more a 20th century new Chinese poetic form. So there, but personally, I think Dickinson is also a poet of transition very much. So she's also experimenting with all kind of poetic forms to make the poems like sound more dense or more modernistic rather than more classic and poised and more like following strictly the regular rigid rhyming schemes. So I think by what you're doing exactly the right thing to sort of show her experimentality by showing that transitional quality there, that awkwardness her poems sometimes produce, the effect of the awkward poetic form and rhythm and sound that her poems are producing upon the reader. Yeah, so those are the quick response. But do feel free to, yeah, chipping in. Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Do you have
Jared?
any other comments?
Yeah, we got a bunch.
Oh, good.
Jared? Gerard?
Yeah, Gerard.
He vanished.
You need to unmute, Jared.
Yeah, I thought I did, but not quite fully here yet, apparently. Although I did really appreciate the richness of this conversation. I loved how you structured it so that it was from the perspective of translators of the poems and then the sort of translation into music. I thought that was a really creative approach to this. What it made me wonder was whether anyone's come across any recent musical settings of Dickinson's work by people whose kind of like homeland and native language are not English. In other words, Chinese musical composers or so forth and so on. In the way, because I think it's fairly common. Tell me if I'm wrong, but my experience has been that there's an established sort of track of setting German or Russian or Spanish poems to music by U.S. and British composers. But so I'm wondering, A, whether you've come across examples of this, and B, because this is a translation question, sort of this is a forum for thinking about translation. Are those composers using Dickinson's texts in English, or are they translating for the settings? Thank you, everybody.
Well, off the top of my head, I want to venture to say that they are using the English translations. I can't think of anything in particular, but when I've seen Dickinson's poems set to music by composers, let's say from Germany or whatnot, they use the original English. That's a very interesting question.
Can I just ask a question that's like a very quick follow-up question? Because I've noticed that a lot of the sort of canonical settings of Dickinson's poems use the 1890 version because it's in the public domain, right? Which sort of like is problematic for us, sort of poetry nerds, but not necessarily for musical composers. So I'm wondering if this might be like too inside baseball or something, but whether they're sort of like using the most recent materials.
I can answer that one. I'm writing an opera on Dickinson right now, and I contacted Harvard, and they wanted so much money. I was like, yeah, no way. So I actually went back to the originals and used a lot of the poems in the public domain ones are almost the same. So once you put it to music, there's not really much difference. And then I don't have to pay Harvard.
Yeah, of course I had to pay Harvard for my book, and it was hundreds of dollars. And
that's what I'm saying.
That's the way it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, you had no choice though, so I do. Want to go, Emily?
But yeah, a lot of composers, including me, use the translations that are out of copyright. Yeah,
Sure.
Emily, do you have a question?
And a couple things. I wanted to answer Jared's question. There is a Swedish folk singer who has done Dickinson in both Swedish and English. So she has English versions, she has Swedish versions. She's also done an album of Emily Bronte. Her name is Sophie Liebrandt. She performed in Maryland at one of the conferences there. She's absolutely terrific. And she's also done a set of songs by a Swedish composer. And her instrumentation is very interesting. And then Rhiannon Giddens is currently performing a setting of Hope is the Thing with Feathers with a I want to say the composer is from Senegal. That one is in English. So they're outside of the classical tradition. There are composers who are doing these sorts of settings. That's to answer your question. The other thing I wanted to comment on, George, you mentioned the Germania Serenade Band and the term in Musicians Wrestle Everywhere, the image that jumped out at me as a fifth generation German band member is Brazen Robins. The Moravians, of course, brought German music to the colonies well before the 1840s. They were already doing that in the 18th century. And I wonder if anyone who sets Musicians Wrestle Everywhere is is tempted to replicate the sound of the Brazen Robins. I don't know that in the settings you discussed today that would be the case, but I certainly hear an allusion to the Brazen Robins mentioned in the letter to Austin in the way in which she refers to the bands in the poem. Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I got to warn everybody here. Emily is the reigning expert on Emily Dickinson music. Whenever I have trouble or don't know anything, I go to her.
Well, I just gave you a reference to Georgie Strickland's wonderful compendium of her discography, which is in the Commons, Digital Commons. It's an excellent compilation of Dickinson song settings and recordings that are available. But I would yield to Nicole on that expertise here. And her hand is up.
Yeah, let's ask her.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you. I just, yeah, it's been such an amazing panel session, and thank you to all of the presenters. And I just have two things I'd like to say. They're more sort of musings, I guess. The first is, for me, there's an interesting continuum in terms of Dickinson translation and music. And that is her writing, composition, but actually the performer as translator, which I think is an important discussion point, and the audience as translator of this sort of triple dialogue. So actually we've got this continuum of a variety of different translators. And as you know, as someone who's played a lot of Dickinson settings over the years, there is like a profound calling to translate the dual narrative of poet and composer, but in the performer's own terms, as someone who's intricately woven within the continuum, but also independent in terms of their artistic response. And I think what's also interesting here is when we're looking at composition and we're looking at composition that's electronically produced versus composition that's performed either live or in the recording studio on instruments, then we have this sort of blurred boundary of the composer as also performer. Unless I guess we're looking at, sort of, I don't know, electroacoustic performance. So I think that this is very interesting discussion of where are the boundaries and how fluid are these relationships. So there's just some of my thoughts.
Georgia, I think you need to unmute yourself.
I think you're absolutely correct in what you say in the sense of electroacoustic music. In my particular situation, I didn't have live performers, so I had to rely on the MIDI samples that were inherent in the notation software, which was Dorico, which is the new notation software, and also Note Performer, which enhances the music. And a composer just can do the best that they can do with these tools in lieu of a live performance. I wish I had a live performance, but
and I do understand, and I think that in a lot of cases, well, it's common, isn't it? It's common in terms of composers not only turning to, but actually perhaps preferring to use MIDI. But I think what's interesting is when a composer is using sampling, is there a performative act as well as a compositional act? And what does that mean in terms of translation of the poetry? Is it a dual response, or is it compositional and the performative is actually as some sort of byproduct? I'm not sure.
Well, I suppose if you're a professional composer or arranger who deals with these electronics every day, yeah, I think that might be a consideration, but certainly not in my case.
Yeah, and there doesn't have to be a line between performer and composer. So if you think of Philip Glass is a composer, but he also performs his own stuff. But he also creates stuff that you couldn't possibly perform. So, and there's certain things you can do, for instance, with a MIDI controller that you literally can't do live, right? So one question is, am I taking sounds that I could have made with live musicians, right, and then cutting them out? We're getting ready to go into the recording studio, and that day I'm going to spend $5,000. Right. So, or can I create a similar, something very close to the music, and then that allows me, for instance, with the sound baths, I've already created 10 of them. If I'd had to hire musicians, I'd probably have 4 of them. Right. So it's an interesting choice of possibilities, to put it that way.
Do we have other comments?
Could I add one other interesting collaboration that is current, and that is the one with Joyce DiDonato and Kevin Putz. She's currently touring with Time for Three, and it's a song cycle that is very interesting. The instrumentation is very interesting, and definitely it is a performative, I mean, the performers, the artists, are a part of the way in which that set of poems, songs are interpreted and the way in which they are performed on the stage. So I don't know, Dan, if anybody's set to do a review of that. I know it was at Carnegie Hall and the
Yeah.
album has been released.
Yeah, I saw it at Carnegie, and it was quite spectacular. It's a little over an hour long, and it's certainly a whole evening's performance.
Yeah, she's
And,
coming to Charlotte in October.
Yeah.
And I've been asked to do a preview, so
Great.
it's a quite interesting set of songs, and the way Putz has set them.
Yep.
Putz, is it Putz or Putz?
I think it's Putz.
Okay. Interesting pronunciation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a terrific piece. It's a spectacular piece. And yeah, we'll see. We'll see if someone can review it. I think that would be an important piece in the bulletin, for sure.
Hi, Dan, I'm here.
There you go.
Call me. Write to me.
Do we have any other comments? I can't see.
I think
Axel's got one.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have a translation-related question, especially for Chinese translators and speakers. Going back to As Something in a Summer's Day, the second line reads, as slow as her flambeau burn away. Obviously, flambeau is a French word. What do you do in Mandarin or in Chinese in general when you see a clearly foreign word in English like flambeau? What will be that other language that you would go to in Chinese? Because I mean, most of neighboring Asian languages and cultures are influenced from Chinese. So, do you have like another rival language or cultural sphere against which you would have to compare and then choose a more ancient word? Or how would you like, because she's not using an Anglo-Saxon word like torch, but she's saying flambeau. So what would you use what would you go to as an option? What would be your strategic a language or whatever source it would be when you're translating that word or similar words in Dickinson's poetry?
Maybe I will quick respond to it. I think Baihua probably has more experience about this. But there are a lot in terms of translation of foreign terms. I feel like there are a lot Taiwanese translators using the Japanese translation to see whether there's some kind of a suitable type of terms they might be using. Because a lot of, for example, the Dickinson poems were translated into Japanese before they were translated into Chinese. And there's some kind of comparison there that could be done. And I'm also aware that now a lot of Taiwanese translators will probably just translate the sound of the word to make it clearly foreign, like so people will be aware, very much aware this is about borrowed term or a foreign term. And then they probably will insert a footnote of some sort. Having long footnotes nowadays are very popular. It's a very popular thing to do for a lot of translators. A lot of my colleagues translate, say, Finnegan's Wake. They translate Swift's Gulliver's Travel, and the footnotes are longer than the translation themselves. And I don't know whether it's a good thing or not, but they really enjoy this delight in this scholarly endeavor. So there could be possibly another the third way of dealing with it. This is a quick answer, but I'm sure Baihua or any other Chinese speakers might be able to chip in. I see my student Ting Huan, you're there too, right? Okay.
Do we have any other comments? It's getting, we've gone over by almost 20 minutes. Unless there are more comments, I think we should wrap this up. I would encourage you to come to the members meeting at 10:30. Always very interesting to hear what's going on with the society. So as we wrap it up here, I want to thank Don, Baihua, Axel, Bruna, for their wonderful contributions, and I've had a lot of fun, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be doing this. So,
thank you.
Thank you. So
yes, thank you, George.
Well, thank you. We'll